Today's topic is a random one. Welcome to another episode of TABLEscraps, in which we present a topic related to tabletop gaming and then have a brief conversation about it with the live audience. Let's not waste any more time listening to this weird intro music. Let's get right into today's discussion. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of TABLEscraps, the month-long experimental daily web series in which I will discuss a topic submitted by the live streaming audience about tabletop gaming and then discuss it with the live streaming audience. So let's not waste any time dillying or dallying. Let's get right into today's topic, which comes to us from Daniel Gross, who says to us, "Are dice and cards the only components that can give a game randomness? What game components are underrated, and what other objects could be used to give randomness to a game?" Before I get into my answers about the topic, I just wanted to point out that Jason stole some of my answers very well, and he mentions that spinners, drawbags, and towers from Shogun come to mind as ways of introducing randomness. So yes, Daniel, not only is your question a really excellent one, but Jason's response in the forum there to your question is also an excellent one. He covers spinners and drawbags and the little random cube tower from Shogun. In addition to that, I was thinking another item that's, I think, underutilized in creating randomness in games is flipping a coin. I mean, it's a very common thing that happens all the time. You know, whether you are starting a football game or a Batman villain, flipping a coin is something that I think could be incorporated into games a lot more frequently. In fact, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to think which games use a coin flipping mechanism, and the best example I could think of was a lot of the cards in Magic the Gathering that cause coin flipping. And other than that, I was kind of hard pressed to come up with another game that consistently uses coin flipping as a mechanism in the game. So if you know of any, let me know. In the meantime, I want to go to your other questions here. What game components are underrated? Well, I have always thought of two things here. I have thought that sand timers are underutilized. It seems like sand timers used to be super mega popular and then appeared in a lot of games, especially party games. But it seems more and more, perhaps because of the advent of smartphones, sand timers seem to be becoming obsolete and are becoming more rare. Again, maybe I'm just picking up different games and not seeing them. But the single most underutilized component that I could think of would be a soundtrack. The game Escape from the Cursed Temple is a timed 10-minute game that actually has a 10-minute soundtrack that you play as you play the game. And there's very, very few games that actually have an audio component that is a critical required portion of the game. So for my list, the most underutilized component would be a soundtrack. And finally, just a little aspect of the game, what would be the absolute worst component? Well, I discussed this a few episodes ago. My least favorite component in the world is the dreaded spinner. And if you want to hear my story about my experiences with the dreaded spinner in the game of life, you can go back to a couple episodes ago. But suffice it to say, that is my least favorite component of all time. So that's what I think about randomness, underutilized components, and components that need to be thrown on the burn pile. Let's continue now to the live streaming chat to find out what you guys think about your answers to those same questions, whatever they just were, because I can't even remember the words coming out of my mouth. But hopefully you guys can. Guys like you, Brian Fitting, who says, "Isn't flipping a coin just like a D2? I mean, there's several games that use 50-50 chance on the dice." True, but if I wanted to become super nitpicky, which I'm sure we're all aware I have no problem doing, rolling a die and say a die 6 and having the odd numbers be one result and the even numbers be the other result may give you the same final results, but it is a different component. So it will have a different aesthetic, a different tactile sensation, be fit into the game perhaps a certain different way. So really, yes, you might be able to get the same results, but it is a different component. And I don't know if that makes it important enough to lobby for the coin flip or if it's just inconsequential and treating a dice as a D2 just by the way you divide the numbers, if that's satisfactory. Let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. Trevin mentions many electronic components are used for randomness. The Squawk Box app, random timers, DVDs, or even a VCR tape. At least the first time you watch it. That is true. The DVDs are one way of creating randomness I didn't even think of. And yeah, that's the capability of the technology there really actually introduced a method of randomness before we got to apps and everything. They helped fill in that gap in human technology where we weren't quite smart enough to figure out tablets and apps and smartphones. But thankfully, we still had the DVD to give us a new method of randomosity. So yeah, I think the DVD there actually I think the DVD there is worthy of a few more applause than it has. I think I'm going to cut that whole thing out. I'll just cut to me going, yeah, and then we'll move on. Yeah. If you're wondering how a VCR tape could be used for randomness, I recommend listening to any of the episodes of Flip the Table where they play a VCR game, because some of these games where you have a finite VCR tape, the developers of the game actually came up with some clever ways to introduce some randomness and some replayability into a VCR game. It's actually kind of fascinating, some of the little twists and tricks that they came up with to make that happen. So I recommend checking that out. Toyota Wolf mentions Agents of SMERSH uses a poker chip that you flip for one of their characters as a special power. Oh, there you go. There's the equivalent of a coin flip right there. With poker chip, I think, qualifies as coin flip. So thank you for pointing that out. Agents of SMERSH on the cutting edge of coin flip randomness technology in our games. So let me know if there's any others that we can remember too, because I was not aware of that one. Kabuki Kid mentions Space Hulk added a sand timer recently. That was to speed up the turn for the Terminator player though, to simulate making fast decisions under pressure. Not really to make it more random though. I haven't played Space Hulk with a sand timer though, and I think that actually could be an interesting way to ramp up the tension. It would be neat too with Space Hulk if there was some sort of app that played ambient music, kind of like the Escape with its own soundtrack. And so every now and then in you have like clangs and things that you'd hear on a derelict spaceship. If there was like a crash or some sort of alert sound, an alarm that goes off that lets you know that your turn's up, that would be a really neat way to introduce a timer into like a game like Space Hulk, where you really want that eerie, gritty, tension-filled ambiance. But again, I'm getting on the soundtracks here, and we want to talk about randomness. So in a way, I did introduce randomness by jumping onto a random topic there, but that's ridiculous. What's not ridiculous is Eric's post. Eric says, there's a nice app to help choose a first player. It's great when you don't want to deal with who last planted a tree, who has the longest hair, or the youngest, etc. And I think there's several. The one I know of is everybody who is playing the game puts their finger on the screen of the mobile device, and then one of them gets highlighted with a circle, and whoever has the circle is the first player. I can't remember the name of the app. I'm sorry. I wish I could. But yes, that's a really good app. We use it all the time, and I highly recommend it. And if there's other apps that do that, let me know, because that's a really easy, fast way to determine first player. And it's a random way. Tying it back into the whole episode here. That's really cool of us. Christopher says, Damage Report uses sand timers in an interesting way. That's a real-time game when you have to flip your empty timer and take an action. Thank you, Christopher. And I'm just assuming that's probably what you sound like. Just pulling that out of thin air. I know Christopher. He's one of my best friends. So I'm quite aware that that's nothing like what you sound like. Except today, which it is. I was doing the accent. I didn't even pay attention to your question. Is that the game where there are multiple spaces and multiple sand timers, and you are flipping the sand timers for each individual space? Or is that a different game? Those are an excellent example of using the most underutilized sand timer. So that's definitely a game I need to go find out more about, because that is a very unique approach to it. Jaso Menzi mentions, in my opinion, the most underutilized component has got to be cubes. That's an interesting take on it. The cube may be something that may, as time goes by and custom-made meeples become more and more common, the humble little cube may actually become endangered and be, replaced with, corn meeples and people meeples and everything else. So we could very well see a day where cubes are only shown in, black and white old photographs from, games we played long ago. Be interesting to see if that happens, though. I think it'd be a while, but now I'm going to keep an eye out for it, because it's a good point. The cubes may be something that our technological advances in game components make less and less common. Let's go on to Dot, who says, aren't coins just dice with two sides? Yeah, unless they're a double-sided coin. There's that. But other than that, yeah. It's a very good point, Dot. Trevin mentions that sand timers are going out because of the variance. They don't give exact time, and they can be off by several seconds. It's another test for the gaming mythbusters. That is true. I have a drawer that's full of sand timers that my daughter used to actually just like to play with. She would actually have sand timer races. And I noticed that even sometimes you go to a thrift store and you pick up multiple copies of the same game. So they have, sand timers that are supposed to be the same length of time. They were never equal. And so she would, be playing with these sand timers, and I would start to notice that certain ones definitely ran longer and shorter than the others. So that's a really good point about the sand timers there. And that may need to be another experiment that we do. Trevor mentions Apples to Apples has a random aspect. The one choosing always ends up picking just some random selection. I hate those types of games, says Trevor. Yeah, I can totally see a game like Apples to Apples being susceptible to that sort of random response, and which can make it a really difficult challenge to play the game well. Some people get frustrated by that, and some people actually find that really enjoyable about the game. So to each their own, but I can totally see that. Let's go to Toyota, who says, Arkham Horror, the card game, doesn't have dice. It uses tokens instead. I almost mentioned Gloomhaven, but that uses cards too. That is something really neat about Arkham Horror, is that you're pulling the tokens out of the bag. And I'm going to need someone to, I can't remember, when you pull out the tokens, are they removed from the pool of other tokens in the bag, or do they go back in? Because I seem to remember some buddies of mine playing Arkham Horror a few months ago, and they were pulling bad stuff out of the bag over and over and over again. And it didn't seem to ruin the experience for them. They were frustrated, sure, but it made me wonder if those bad tokens were being put back into the bag each time they're drawn, or if there were just that many bad tokens, or my friends were just having that bad of luck. Anyone who wants to clarify that for me in the comments, I would appreciate it, because it's something that off the top of my head I can't remember, but it would definitely have an impact on the playability, or it definitely have an impact on your experience playing that game, depending which way it is. David's going to wrap us up by saying, there are gimmicks that sound cool, like the Pop-O-Matic, but then they just turn out to be cheesy when you're actually playing. And that is true. And that actually may be a topic for another episode. We'll be talking about randomness this time. Cheesiness in games and cheesy components may be a topic for a future episode. But for now, we got to wrap up this one, because apparently my dogs have found something that they want to attack desperately. So while I go find out what I need to rescue from these dogs, I want to remind everyone else that you can continue this conversation on our Facebook and Twitter pages as well, and in the YouTube comments below. And this episode and episodes like it have been made possible by the support of viewers just like you, who join us and sit through me bumbling through words as I speak. Thank you ever, sir. There's an example right there. Thank you for your support, and it's greatly appreciated. In the meantime, I've been Chaz Marler, who, along with the YouTube live streaming chat, have been serving up some table scraps. Thanks. We'll talk to you again soon. This episode is about randomness, so hopefully the comments won't be too random. So there we go. We're right off the cuff having stuff. It rhymed. That was horrible. Bark, bark, bark. I think that there's... I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, yes, I have notes. That's why I have notes. Good for the notes. Yeah.